All right. I guess before we get started, I will let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded on Microsoft Teams, and participation in the meeting is consent to be recorded and to the rebroadcast of the recorded meeting. This recorded meeting will be posted on the Culver YouTube site. Roll call.
Sure. Karen Schumann.
Present.
John Rogers.
Present.
Gary Herrick. Present. Sally Shardy.
Present.
Paul De Benedictis.
Present.
Bill Clevenger.
Present.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I forgot to do the informational meeting minutes, so I have approval of the July 19th regular meeting minutes.
I make a motion to approve the July 19th regular meeting minutes.
Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item on the agenda is the town manager report on Stuller projects.
Does anyone need a copy of the report? All right. The Paddocks ribbon cutting took place a couple weeks ago, and they had quite a large turnout. There were also some organizations there like Culver Community Schools helping to educate some of the residents on what's available in the community. So that was really nice to have available. I've noted for you that Sand Hill Farm is now 100% occupied. That wasn't a Stuller project, but it led into the Stuller housing project. The Paddocks, they're finishing up the last building, but otherwise all the buildings that are complete are 100% occupied. If you went to the ribbon cutting, as I know some of you did, you saw lots of kids outside, which was kind of nice to see because that was one of our goals.
20.
And hopefully they're attending the Culver Community.
20 are officially.
Next in the report is the TIF review. This past last week, Paul and Bill and I have started that process. Paul and Karen worked together on putting a spreadsheet of all of the TIF properties. So we're like systematically going through those one by one, taking notes along the way, learning a lot about each of the properties, and determining some questions that Karen is helping with and potential questions that the attorney may need to help with. But it's becoming pretty obvious to us which ones might need to be addressed as we go. So we are working on those on Wednesdays and Fridays until we're done. And apparently our technology is now working better thanks to Paul and Bill figuring that out.
Sherlock.
Yeah, it was.
Lake Max Trail Phase 2, that is a Stuller project, a Culver Stuller 1. And we just received a letter, notice to proceed, which means NDOT thinks all of our paperwork's in order, the money's been released, and the construction company will get started. According to the engineer, we're looking at mid-September for that to happen. And we will probably be making a few tweaks as we go through that process during construction, mainly to kind of tweak the scope of work to lower those construction costs. But no major huge things, just minor. Lake Max Phase 3. This was an NDOT grant. It's not a Stuller project. It's a grant we won after we won Stuller, when NDOT was feeling generous about giving more money to the Stuller community. And this one, I think we brought to you guys at your last meeting when I was out in Carolina. And you all had approved the $30,000 funding of upfront work that Culver Academy is sharing an expense in. And I think you wanted more information on this one.
We
And I
wanted to
think-
know what the rest of
Yeah,
the
budget.
portion that they were asking for CRC to cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think since then Karen's provided you guys some information on that. I don't know if you want to address that now or,
Just, I know you gave us TIF 2, that's the bill we just paid, right? The 100 and some thousand. But and maybe I missed it, the information on what we are supposed to be, what we've been asked to cover for the, I'm sorry, for not TIF 2, for phase 3 of the trails. Sorry.
Yeah, you've already paid that bill. You paid that bill, and that was one that was kind of.
For phase 2.
That we wanted to get taken care of.
Right.
I also, in the dashboard,
Mhm.
the money is already set aside or committed, it's shown as committed.
For phase 3.
For phase 3,
Okay.
correct.
All right.
So I don't think there's an additional ask at this point until, like with phase 2, we go to construction and the bids come in, however they go. But right now, I believe the money that is needed for phase 3 is already shown as committed.
we just weren't sure if that was ever a recorded vote or not.
Yeah.
I wasn't
We just
sure.
wanted
Jonathan
formal.
brought you guys that at any.
Do you want us to do
Yeah.
resolutions or just a standard vote?
You know what, at some point, if we could do an actual formal resolution, that would be wonderful, so that it's written down and easily accessible versus paging through.
So
month
for,
minutes.
if you execute it in 23 or 24, that whoever's at CRC at the time will be able to find it.
Yes, yes, so, if it's okay, I mean, if you do a verbal, yes, we're committed to it, I can prepare a resolution just to formalize it.
That would be
And
great.
bring it to your next meeting.
That doesn't affect the timeline. That'd be great.
Well, I mean, you're already paying bills, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at the minutes. We approved the half of the design phase, right? The 30,000 for phase 3.
Right,
And
so,
the academy is gonna kick in
yes.
the other 30,000.
But what we're actually looking for is a commitment to the match for the whole project.
Yeah.
Which it may have been discussed at some point and maybe a verbal kind of, yeah, we'll support it was made, but it was never a formal, I've looked through the minutes looking for it and I'm not.
Right.
seeing where
If it
is.
was a formal vote, it was just, didn't get.
Yeah, and I have a feeling it wasn't.
I think it
so,
was just, we support it.
Yeah,
And I think that at the time, we didn't have the figures.
and that may be as well. So just to give it,
Mhm. Do you know
with
how
all the
much,
changeover we've had, I'd like to
Yeah.
just get.
and that number, the number for phase 3?
I don't have it off the top of my
Oh,
head.
no
but I
worries
can- When I put together the resolution, I'll send that.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, Jenny.
That's okay. No, I think there might be some discussion of that.
Can we, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the support of matching funds for the
Yeah,
trails
I can
phase
give you
3.
an estimate because at the time that we won that grant, when they originally sent it to us, they sent us like, it was an odd number, like you're gonna get 678,000. Well, then Jonathan looked at it and that they had broken out each phase and it's really a total of closer to 900,000. So NDOT requires 20% match, so it'd be 180,000. Somewhat like, I think your phase 2 is probably in the 200,000 range, because I
Yeah.
think that one was closer to $1 million. And we can certainly verify that.
I will make the motion. I'm a little confused as to what I'm moving to, but
Mhm.
I think the last meeting, we focused on the $60,000.
We did.
Right.
And then I think we basically said, we're not gonna have a motion for the rest of it because we really
We don't know how much it is.
at this point how much
Okay.
it is. So that's kind of where we're at today. Maybe we have better numbers than the last meeting.
Karen, do you need a vote today to, in order to?
For
or
phase
can we-
3.
For phase 3, or can we just wait until we get the resolution and then
We
approve
can
it
wait
at
until
that
we get
time.
the resolution.
At least.
I'm just gonna, as long as you're okay with me continuing paying the bills for the phase 3, and we're kind of understanding that
Yeah, that it
you're gonna
was.
take care of it.
Yeah.
No one's gonna go off the deep end next month and backtrack, so, we'll get it taken care of all in one fell swoop, and,
Okay.
and that way we have numbers. It's in the dashboard, but
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I withdraw my motion then for,
Okay.
And we'll just do it as a resolution. Yeah.
State and Jefferson Street Trail, that's an NDOT project that was done through, our Culver Stuller. As you guys can see, that's coming along. We haven't reached what's called substantial completion yet. So we're still paying bills on that. What will happen is we'll hit substantial completion soon, and then Bob will provide a punch list to the contractor. And we will not release their last payment until that punch list is done. Substantial completion just tells NDOT we're like 95% done. And we're getting close to that. You've probably seen some sod go in. State Road 10 is much further along than Jefferson. We did find with the latest rains, we have a couple of drainage issues on Jefferson Street. So we won't hit substantial completion until that contractor fixes those issues. And there's 3 spots that really need some attention. But that's what's going on with that project. Tamarack property annexation. Tomorrow, Sally, myself, the town attorney, Jim Clevenger, who's been looped in now, and Burke Richardson, who's the attorney for Collins and Company. We're meeting tomorrow afternoon. And we're going to talk about that development agreement and what that might look like. At some point, if you all are ready to move into reviewing whatever that draft will look like, I would recommend an executive session because it may involve some negotiation. It may involve some of that type of conversation. That's probably a good month or 2 out still. That process is going to go slowly. That will also eventually go to the town council for approval to be annexed. The plan commission has already voted to recommend annexation on that project. This has been through BZA. They've approved what the company wants to do there. So now we just need to work out how we're going to pay for the utility infrastructure setup. The Economic Development Initiative, I have a more recent update than the one on your report. I just got off the phone with Cheryl Morphy before this meeting. One of the things that we had talked about was the fact that the town is kind of going into a planning phase. We're looking at possibly starting a new comprehensive plan in the next year, this Economic Development Initiative. And one of the things I told her I thought would be really important is to make sure that this group, as well as our chamber and some other key stakeholders, obviously, have some voice in however this all comes together. What are we expecting the outcome to be of this planning session? What's the mission of forming an alliance of stakeholders to do it? That sort of thing. So Cheryl and I are going to roll out an agenda in the next day or 2 based on today's conversation, but we'd really like possibly the opportunity to meet with redevelopment separately, as well as maybe within a bigger group. And we're thinking the same thing with chamber. So I'm sending her a list of stakeholders that we put together for launching this initiative. I got some help from Boo Marshall, Paul's wife, on re-engaging with some people we talked about engaging with last fall, some of the remote workforce, some business owners, some people we had thought about. So I talked with Cheryl about that, and we're kind of thinking about really making this August 30, 31 time frame about forming the alliance, what's going to be the mission, what are we expecting the outcomes to be. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And I'll probably send out some communications this week. Ms. and I are kind of going back and forth on email and on the phone, and heavy duty conversation.
A couple of people have asked Boo and myself, did they miss the invitation? Because their calendar's getting close. So if you're sending, sooner is better than later in sending something out right now.
we'll be communicating with them tomorrow. We talked about that today.
Yeah.
I didn't want to jump the gun until I talked to her.
Mhm.
Regional Stuller Park project, Amber's here to discuss that one. I think we gave you a bit of a heads up in the email
Mhm.
with probably more detail than you wanted, but I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Amber, and then we'll come back to the town manager report, if that's okay.
And we'll just cross that off, new business.
Yeah, perfect. I have all the attachments I sent you guys, if anybody wants one. Does anybody want one? There's budget, the design plan, do you want one? No.
Did you say that, like, if you send it electronic, well,
Here you go. Little Sally.
yes, and that.
Okay, here's your beloved map. Do you guys want one or are you
I got it
good?
right here, thanks.
Do you want a map?
I like a map.
Okay.
Mine didn't, thank you.
Okay. And then this last one you guys didn't get, but these are very rough drafts of ideas that we have, but I'll give them to you. I didn't send them because they're not set in stone whatsoever, so, and there's that one. So like I said in the email, previous to taking up this design with the preliminary design, I did meet with some stakeholders, which included the Lions Club. I think we've had overall now 3 meetings with them. Jonathan did one of them, I did 2. And then I also met with the Culver Farmers Market coordinators. And then everything else is also based on the fall park survey from 2020, which kind of guided us for this park design. And then I know it was asked, but we do have some public input of 2 public hearing sessions at the August 24th and September 14th meeting, which are coming up as well. So people can provide any type of input they would like at those meetings as well. And then the other page is just the budget. So essentially the project in total is about $600,000. This is provided by Okra. We have to make a 20% match, and that comes out to $120,000. And yeah, basically, I'm just here today to request that you guys help us make that match. Ginny and I had discussed and Karen, how we want to split that 120,000 up. Ideally, these projects that are going through Stuller right now, they keep going over. I think what they say the Reese theater project went way over, and we're just seeing that continually happening. I did approach council and request some funds from the park budget. We got 60,000 from them. The idea is to break ground for this project in the spring of 2022. So that could be potentially covered between the 2 budgets, but since these projects are coming way over, we'd like to request 120,000 from CRC in case, once again, this project goes over, so we don't have to botch or remove any of the items from that budget, and so that the project becomes more limited. I don't know if you have any additional input.
Just a couple of things. Aside from the public hearings that are coming up, those public hearings with Okra requires those. And it's basically your grant administrator comes in with your council and says, we're doing this big grant project. And we're gonna have to spend some local dollars in terms of the match. And we're gonna go through procurement, and here's how it's gonna work. There's also a phase of this, once that side of it's done, which is really Shannon announcing it to the public. We'll also have public input when the final design is done. These preliminary designs are so you can actually apply for the money. So what'll happen is once we get more final, we'll take that out into the public and say, here's your park project. What do you think? If there's a lot of, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this aspect of it, or you've forgotten this aspect of it, we'll go back and look at the scope and go, can we afford all that feedback? Or do we need to change something because it was particularly negative? As you recall, we did this with phase 2 of the trail. And we had some people show up and give us feedback, and we took that feedback, and we had some people who say, you never asked for our feedback. And of course we do. And we'll do that for this as well. So you'll see that beyond these public hearings. The other side of federal dollars with Okra projects, you cannot buy certain things with federal dollars. If it can't stay in the ground, like playground equipment is permanently attached to the ground. The water plant that we did an Okra project on is permanent, you know. But if it's picnic tables or seating, outdoor seating, or grills, or whatever we would want to add to the project, we'll have to pay for separate from the grant money. So generally, you want your local funds to go towards those sorts of purchases, or your local funds go toward, you specifically want this grant administrator, so you pay with local funds. What we're seeing with the regional Stuller projects in Bremen, Argus, the Reese Theater, is the bids have come in really high. Construction costs are really high right now. Supply and demand and all the other issues going on nationally. So our thought was that this is not a large project. So if we have to cut the scope, we're significantly cutting. And our thought was, if we have matching dollars from redevelopment, we'll use our local park dollars to cover any gap and or to purchase some of the things that aren't even in the project scope, because your engineer is not going to put outdoor seating around, you know, this built structure as part of that project, simply because Okra wouldn't approve of that. So we also thought about, if we did 60,000 for the park budget for next year and 60,000 the following year, we could cover the 120. We just need to delay the project by a year. So that's also a possibility. But that was kind of the logic going into this. And being that it's a stellar project and a quality of life project, it's something that legally we felt the CRC can invest in it, so desired.
And this would be going to start next spring.
Ideally, like if, let's say you guys don't grant us any funds, we won't be able to do it next year. Because then we'd have to split up based on the fiscal year, 60 from the park budget in 2022, and then 60 in 2023. We'd like to do it in the spring, but we'd have to acquire those funds elsewhere to do that.
So if we gave you a 60 match now to what the park or the town has put in, you'd be able to start it with the risk of coming back to ask us for more money if you had a cost overrun.
Exactly, yeah.
But you could still start it with that.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Shannon will submit the application after doing what's called an income survey. That income survey has to show we have 51% or more of our population in low to moderate income level. We asked if we could use the Marshall County income survey.
Sure, this park is such a, it's such a draw for Union Township and.
That was the idea behind it, but we just got news today that we can't use the Marshall County income survey, so we'll have to pay Shannon to do the income survey for Culver.
Yeah.
Which will get done obviously and have Shannon do, but
we'll likely do that over.
it's just okay because it'll last 4 years.
Yeah.
So we can use it for other projects as well.
And Okra's working with us on how to make sure the users of the park and that income survey, because we know we're serving a low to moderate.
We're serving a much broader
Like
audience than
yeah.
just people that live on the lake. And,
Yeah,
and it's to
absolutely.
reflect that.
Yeah.
So and knowing it's set aside money, this is stellar money, so they find a way to make it work. The benefit for us in actually doing the income survey, it doesn't expire for 4 years. So if we
absolutely.
apply for a planning grant on doing a comprehensive plan, we'll qualify for dollars. Without that income survey, we won't qualify for future grants. And so the fact that they're going to try to make it work with us is a huge benefit. I mean, income surveys are a bit of a pain, but this will be good for us in the end.
And they said they'd only do it for like 3,000 too, which is a lot of work and pretty good price for that.
You know, I'd asked about environmental. You told me that there was an environmental study done.
Yes.
Will that be published and available to people that are providing input in the public sessions? Will they be able to see the results of it?
Yeah, the environmental study really at this stage is more of getting releases from environmental organizations. So like Potawatomi Indians, there's probably 7 or 8 organizations. Our grant administrator, Shannon, is required to write and say, we're doing a project at this location. Will you release us to do it? That's essentially what this upfront environmental is. There will be other environmental that takes place once we do procurement of the engineer.
Okay, because there's,
And yeah, they usually will come back with, you know, we didn't find anything from a topography standpoint, from a lake standpoint, that would hinder putting this project here. They're required to follow pretty strict guidelines for
and
that.
that was why I asked about Lake Max
Right,
Environmental Council. I would think they would, I mean, this is a huge piece of green space that sits right up against the lake.
Right, yeah.
And permeability ratios and the like, if, you know, people are gonna ask about how much concrete's going in there compared to what it is. I know you have ADA requirements
Right,
for certain things, but I suspect you'll get a lot of feedback from a lot of people about putting in the minimum you have to of concrete on grass.
right. And Shannon will be there at all those public hearing meetings as well, so.
I mean, Paul, they even look at, are there bats in the trees surrounding the area? Because if there
You can only
are,
cut trees at a certain time of year.
you can't do construction when bats are in mating season.
Mhm.
They look at like all sorts of weird things. But that's not this upfront. Shannon has completed that upfront environmental work,
Okay,
and you cannot submit an application to Okra without that being done and without the income survey being done. So even though we've already won the Stuller money, you still have to submit an application because there's all those federal guidelines that they have to adhere to. And she's prepping that application and that public hearings, environmental.
but is
release.
it accurate to say that that initial environmental work reflects the potential impact on the lake of making these changes? Okay, then because
It's just organization.
right, okay. So
the
that
state
would
allows to
come
say
later.
yes or no.
That would come later as people are giving feedback and and
Yes.
other stakeholders are involved. Okay.
Yes.
What's the plan with the existing equipment? Demoed, or is it gonna be allowed to be disassembled and relocated to another part?
I don't think there's not a plan as of right now, no.
That's just one thing I hear
Yeah.
from the park bias is that there's not a little kid stuff, but that
Right,
could be intentional too.
right,
but-
yeah, we can talk to them about it, certainly.
It's a good idea.
Yeah,
Recycle is
We
better
could,
than-
yeah, definitely donate it to some type of organization.
I know they just want to cut it at the ground and haul away. Like, because you have demolition in there, sometimes it's more
Yeah.
expensive to
And
disassemble.
I think
Right.
if we asked for a cost, at least we could, find out what it would cost to do the extra work. That might even be something some of our own crew could do. I don't know, we could take a look at it.
It's a good point.
Amber, it looks like that in your estimate, it looks like the biggest thing is going to be the playground equipment.
Yeah,
Okay, is that, have you priced that? Is that where this figure comes from?
yeah, so this, I mean, Troy Group put this together and that's all based on very rough estimates that we've come up with based on the structures. I mean, it's gonna change based off of public input too. Yeah, what you see there. I mean, what we had come up with was the main play structure being a lighthouse to kind of fit with the nautical theme that's going on in the park, with the sailboat playground, and then the, you have the bocce ball court, the swing over there, the bench swing, the trampolines, and then I don't know what they call it, like the spider thing with the swing underneath it. I mean, Troy Group priced us out for that based on those recommendations that I gave, based on the surveys. But like I said, it's also, that number may change based off of public input and how we want to alter it.
That budget is required for that application. And it's considered a preliminary budget. So once you have to have something to go to Okra that's going to ultimately get bid on. And that's,
And basically, as long as we stay within the scope of what we presented to Okra, it's usually fine.
Okay.
As long as we're in the scope of, playground equipment, they'll allow it.
You had talked about pickleball.
Yeah, that's a separate project that I'm working on with the basketball court.
Oh, that'll be the basketball.
Yeah, that was
Okay,
part
all
of
right.
the 30,000 of the park budget that I'm working on.
Any thoughts about a dog park? I don't see that listed under the.
We've done lots of public surveying on dog parks. Dog parks are of interest, but not directly in the Culver Park.
It's
So
all really flat.
it fell very flat.
90-some%.
The location is there. That park is not where people want it.
I think we had like 90-some%.
It was not,
Very nice.
people were not very receptive to it, so.
Can you imagine chasing my dog down the hill?
I'll bring my dogs to your house. You got a dog park in the back. Chase each other around. It's fenced off, right?
That's true. And there's no grass worth mentioning growing in it.
Well, yeah.
We had an Eagle Scout who wanted to do a dog park in the park, so we
Explored.
decided to, everyone got a little excited about it, and we surveyed people, and it was like,
Yeah,
There's the potential at the other farm, but
yeah. It's
there is.
green space at the Culver Union Township Park is really the focus of most people rather than,
Mhm.
Well, I mean, the thought with the dog park here is you want it to act as a magnet to bring people with dogs. So they
Right.
go into all these stores and buy things
Yeah.
and so forth. But if you have it out in the country, then there's, less economic impact.
right?
there is a downtown lot to make.
Yes, I know, that's what I thought of first too.
Only he didn't have plans for it all these years.
That would be perfect.
Literally not now.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
there's
our
dog parks,
softball field.
unofficial ones.
Unofficial.
That's
Shadow
why we
dog
think
park.
we should go ahead and create one.
Right, because we're using them.
But most
Okay.
people are pretty nice about it. There's not to breathe, so.
Hiccup. It happens.
So does it really set you back? And just the question, does it really set you back if we do 60, we commit 60 now, and then you come back with potentially what it could be going over? If you find a cost overrun that you say, look, we're cutting out the bocce ball court and we still are running 30,000 over because of price of materials.
Right.
Would that set you back? We did that, or?
Yeah, I mean, set us back, no, but I mean, just based on the trend that's been happening, it's very likely it's gonna go over. I mean, at least in my experience, even when times weren't what they are now with COVID, with my experience with the Beach Lodge project, I mean, and the Cavalier Park project, it went over even then. So I think the likelihood of it going over is very high, but to answer your question directly, of will it set us back? No.
We're matching the town, basically we're matching the park budget by doing 60.
Right,
Is the park prepared or the town prepared to go cover some overage as well? Just questions I want to ask.
potentially if you ask Karen and I that question right now, our budgets are taking a massive hit through emergency services, which is the topic of your next bullet on my list,
Mhm.
but, we're in a situation we've not seen before in terms of what's happening with our emergency services budgets. So even though the park budget is supported by some revenue, because we aren't supported by strong revenue in other areas, it's really just trying to make up and of course, there's 20 other projects we'd like to do in the park. So we just have to bite the elephant one chunk at a time. 60,000 is a lot of money to the park budget.
Mhm.
It might not be a lot of money to, the CRC or a general fund or whatever, but it's a significant portion of money. And we don't, in the past, that line item that now has 60 in it, in the past, that's like 10,000. We don't usually make large investments unless we've got it what Amber doesn't use in her budget goes right back to her own park fund. Sort of like our money goes back to a general fund that we don't use. If for some reason we don't, what we're finding is we're using every penny and then some. So in general, that's the only other strategy you have is to go figure out where you can get the funds. And, you know, we have tapped out grants, obviously. It's not like we've ignored that side of bringing in revenue, but those grants do take significant matches.
But 60 would get you going. And then if that wasn't enough, you could come back. Is that do I understand that? That's agreeable?
Yes, I mean, there's potential for that, but I mean, assuming then whatever we come back with is then approved, right?
And we're just asking questions.
Yeah, no,
We're gonna talk
no,
about
yes,
this.
absolutely.
I think
So, $600,000 budget, I mean, what's the typical over?
Yeah.
Is it 10%? Is it
On the
15?
Reese Theater, the budget was 700 and some thousand over. That's over $1 million in grant money plus the match. On
The beach lodge was 100,000. I don't remember.
And we still didn't get everything we wanted.
We
No,
ended up cutting stuff out of
yeah,
capital.
we chopped.
And you cut out again.
Maintain the budget.
Between the beach lodge and the Cowell Park, a lot was chopped off.
And it's mainly construction. I mean,
Yeah.
they can ask for whatever they want. Some of them are so busy, they don't even want to bid on projects. That was a concern with the Reese, was getting enough contractors to actually bid to make it competitive. There's not a workforce either, so that becomes part of the issue.
A lot of it's
Right.
labor.
Federal dollars too have to follow Davis-Bacon law, which is the higher wage. So, or a contractor might be able to pay a general laborer $15 an hour. If it's federal dollars, it's more like $24 an hour. So if we were bidding this with local money and they knew there were no federal dollars involved, we'd actually get lower bids. But when federal
I can
dollars are
see that
involved,
now.
they have to follow that labor law
They bump it up.
significantly.
But you're not likely to change this design. Where I'm coming from, in other words, if you had 120,000, are you going to be adding to this, or is this your final design?
I mean, that's gonna depend on the public input. I don't know what that will be. But I can say, even, like, let's say we do that, I imagine come, when would it be, the winter, it'll be higher than what's you're seeing right now on that budget.
Those plans can always change, Bill, based on those input sessions. You know, if someone hates the idea of bocce ball and a bunch of people jump on that bandwagon, we might go, all right, pull the bocce ball out, but put in hopscotch or.
But you're still would stay within the 600 target that you have. It's not like you're gonna take it
Yes.
to 8.
We
Yeah.
try to.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah,
And
We can
Oprah's
spot-
certainly not gonna give you extra money.
right,
So
right.
anything we go over is on us.
the company's bidding might take it to 8, but
Yeah, right.
so.
So we
wanna
certainly,
Fund 60 this year and 60 next year, and just say that we're going to do that, commit a total of 120, and let the park budget take care of the overrun, because we can almost guarantee that there'll be an overrun.
so you're kind of saying, if you're talking to your teenage child going, you wanted this, we're gonna do this, you're going to this school, and this is what we're paying up to this point, the rest is on you, get a job, you know, deliver pizzas, whatever. Because I guess the unspoken thing in my mind is all great. We say, yep, we support this, understand how this has an impact on the town, has an impact on the, you know, all the businesses right in that TIF area there, and hopefully drives them further downtown. But I don't want to do this and commit 60 more than I thought early on, so a total 120,000, and then next year somebody's coming, oh, we need another $60,000. So I guess I'm feeling, you know, if I was feeling something, it would be right now about, I would feel pretty confident that this is gonna, your best the best case, if this covers everything and no one's gonna be talking to us about this from the park until they say the project's complete, how do you like it? You know, that's what we're looking for. I mean, for me, that's what I'm thinking.
So your teenage graduated.
Basically, Dad, I got a job. I'm moving to Chicago.
My master's degree. in Kent, that was about 20
Different
grand for the
negotiations.
undergrad.
But that's just me. So I don't know what you guys are thinking.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't think we need to commit for the overruns right now.
Mhm.
We can be not on the record about that, but perhaps we should commit to the matching piece of it. And then if there is an overrun, we'll examine it at that point. And when do overruns usually happen? During the construction phase?
Bid.
Yeah,
bid.
bid.
Yeah,
So
It's
overruns
sealed,
happen
it's a
probably
sealed,
throughout the entire process, right?
that's a sealed bid process that will occur after release of funds. So that application will get submitted this winter after the income survey and Shannon's done with the application. Okra will send a letter that says release of funds. We will immediately go into procurement. We'll procure the engineer, we'll procure the grant administrator, and then we'll start the bid process. That has to be advertised for 30 days. It's a sealed process. We'll get sealed bids in. They'll be opened at a council meeting and reviewed, and then you go with the lowest bid, and then Shannon will immediately have a pre-construction meeting. And if the bids come in too high, we'll be evaluating, do we need to cut the scope of the project? Do we need to utilize park funds? Do we need to go? So you're talking about spring for us going to bid, probably
Early
April,
spring, yeah.
yeah, March or April.
So we won't really know if there's any overruns until May or June or next summer.
Until that bid comes in, yeah.
Okay.
Now they can't, once they bid, if they bid 600,000, they can't change that midstream. There are change orders in these projects, but we get to make those decisions whether we want to do that or not. So they can't randomly add stuff to it without us.
Okay. So if there's a labor shortage or there's, not hyperinflation, but let's say inflation's 10% next year, we could see that this could be, a $700,000 project, 750,000. Okay. I individually can't commit to any overruns at this point. That's my position.
I understand that. And
But
it's kind of a way of saying, I want to spend X on a car, but I'm willing to spend X plus, whatever. And you're going, well, then that's your new number. Yeah.
The thing is, you also don't want to leave it out there for people that are paying attention to this bid process of, oh, CRC will come up with it. CRC will come up with it.
I
So
don't-
to say that we lock it at a certain dollar amount is better effective communication to those contractors out there, in a sense. You're telling them this is the max that we're going to.
And really, I think you should look at it as, we're asking for a match on a regional Stuller project that's got quality of life. It's more about, is that investment make sense for getting overages and, the fact that the park budget would have to figure things out, but it's kind of like the trail project. Do you believe that's a good quality of life project to support, and will it drive some economic development? And
And with that, you have a history of CRC supporting even if changes were made after we made our initial match. So, and I guess I feel the same thing about, I'm comfortable with committing, not slowing you down, like the idea, what it could do, and committing to that, but not necessarily committing to whatever it takes beyond that. Let's just find out what that is. Because the town will be making some decisions as well around that. Just my thoughts, same.
so,
I think I'm in the same boat. Where I definitely want to support this project. I think it's an exciting project. Good for the town. I think that we have the funds to support, but if it's budgeted for 600,000, we'll take it at face value to start.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the pragmatic approach here and saying, listen, we're probably gonna have to come back to you. And I think we're all inviting that and saying, yes, come back.
Unless Mr. Prasad spends it all.
Yeah, I have a motion.
It'll be the golden age of facade.
We have a motion to fund this project. You to start that, put the figure in.
Motion to approve $60,000 CRC funds.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Thank
Run with
you.
it.
Thank you.
Congratulations. It's rare. So many grants stumble and fall around here. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And you did this one all by yourself,
Yeah.
basically.
No, I
Congratulations.
did not. I
Okay.
did not do this by myself, but I appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a result of the regional stellar win and the fact that Jonathan passed the management of this project on to Amber.
Yes.
Okay, back to the report. So the next thing that Sally put under new business, but I stuck in the report because it's really a town issue. The CRC invested in a ladder truck, I want to say a couple of years ago. For the fire department, obviously. And we have been in the midst of purchasing an ambulance, which is due to show up here in the January timeframe.
First quarter.
And normally in the past, when we purchased an ambulance, it's, around $150,000, but they've gone up significantly since that last purchase. Or, the council's accepted a $285,000 bid purchase for that ambulance. This department has gone from a basic service of volunteers to a paid paramedic service. And with that, we've seen obviously dramatic increases in our budget. I think when Sally and I started on council, the EMS budget was in the $220,000 range. We're right around $600,000 14 years later. At least that's the time I've been on council. Within a paramedic service, you've got to have a full-time paramedic on every single call, which means you've got to hire some full-time paramedics to ensure that they are there. We currently have 4. There's 2 people on every shift. One always has to be a paramedic. The other one can be a different level of service, but you always have to have that paramedic. That industry in the state of Indiana is suffering right now. There's not that many paramedics in Indiana, believe it or not, or in Marshall County. We're looking at adding a 5th full-time paramedic, which comes with full-time benefits and at a cost. In the meantime, there's always equipment costs. So our strategy is going to be to approach Culver academies on doing a more significant contribution to our emergency services. In the past, they've contributed $30,000 across all 3 services, which clearly doesn't even make a dent in the EMS service. So we are trying a new strategy there. But in the meantime, we've obviously hit up CRC with the ladder truck, and I think we had some council members who thought it was worth talking about the ambulance as well to try to make a dent in that bill. Keep in mind, the township helps share our emergency services costs. So if you didn't know that already, in general, they pay about half of fire and EMS. They don't pay for police service budget, but so Marlene Muller and the township paid for half of that ladder truck. And I believe so up front, whereas we kind of had to finance ours in a way.
She paying for, is Union Township paying for half of the ambulance?
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
So, and if you all contribute, she still has to pay her share of that budget, no matter. She sees any contribution from CRC is the same as a contribution from town council. It's town money versus her money. So.
Town taxes from this township.
And Jeff is our director of EMS back here, who can answer any questions about the ambulance. I think Bill Giffens asked him to attend our meeting in case there were questions about the ambulance or.
Jeff, tell us about the ambulance. What's different about this one?
There's a lot of things different with this ambulance over the past other ambulances. since going to an ALS service, there's a lot of more things that come along with it. A lot more technology, a lot more skill, a lot more abilities that are brought to, like you've been talking about, quality of life. We have an aging population in this area here, so our call volume is increased because of that. We also have a recreational area. We also have an academy that fluctuates our population. So all of those play into that role. Now, when getting an ambulance, this ambulance is designed with the user in mind. So it's ergonomically built, so it maximizes the abilities inside the ambulance. It also has factors in there to reduce injuries from the crew members that also come in there. And it allows us to perform more functions and more skills more effectively inside this unit here. Unfortunately, the cost, like Jenny was saying, is rising dramatically over the last year. I've been at it for 29 years, and I've seen these numbers jump exponentially over the last 10 years. And now this year, it's gone even more. We have issues with technology and chips, as you may see in the news there. So all those are driving that. And then workforces and part shortages are also causing delays as well, and also causing increases as well. And so less and less of aluminum is made in the United States anymore, so it's more imported. So once again, those fees go up. But all in all, the ambulance has been redesigned to be the user so it can be effectively used within the community. It could also be effectively used with crew members to provide efficient and fast and proper care to anyone who may need it when we are called to need.
What's the lifespan?
10 years, 10, 11, 12 years, depending on use.
Is there, because we're getting a more effective vehicle, is there a reduction in our insurance premiums
I would say no on that. Well, we are going to be doing going from
Insurance.
this year?
we're going from a diesel to to gas, so our costs will go down. So in that reflect, but other than that, you know, going from a BLS service to an ALS service helps the community out in many different ways. Just like that ladder truck does for the community, the ambulance is just the same. So having that helps not only the people that live here, but the people that visit here, the people that come here, people that may go to school here, and having this type of service, and unfortunately the higher costs that come along with it, can also promote the town in a more positive way, because we didn't have some of the communities, we didn't have the lake, we didn't have some of these things in downtown. This would be a very small, just another stop in the road here. But what has been made over the years is a destination. And so having that premier service, you know, aids to not only the people that live here, the people that come here and stay half the year. When they call for service, they get the same service they get in a big town. So part of that is just the rising cost.
Anyone else have this type of service in our area?
Plymouth is the next closest.
We used to contract for that for paramedic calls. And one of the reasons we wanted to go paramedic is because over 50% of the calls, they couldn't be here. If their ambulance was out,
Right.
you didn't have a paramedic. And that got increasingly worse.
So we did the ladder truck. You've got this. Is there something else close in, or is this like just understanding cash flow? Is this next couple of years? No other.
No, we're not due for the other replacement of the other truck till
5 years is normally.
yeah, we're like at 27, 28, 2028.
Okay.
So we're asking for this one-time request here. Everything else we're trying to maintain within the budget. We appreciate any support you may give.
It is one of the areas within a redevelopment commission's scope is around safety.
Yeah.
General safety, and that's one of the exclusions of doing work with the government or quasi-government. It allows you to do that one, and that allowed us to do what was it, $100,000 for the ladder truck. I think that was our part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to see 100,000 for the ambulance.
You're making a motion?
I make a motion that we fund the ambulance in the amount of $100,000.
You're asking for 20? I'm sorry, that's really, I don't know.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did notice on your new business, you've got sewer and water expansion for Tamarack Road. You guys feel like that was covered in the report? I have to go to another meeting, so I want to make sure there's no other questions related to that.
Not this. I know, Sally, I guess you're gonna talk about the $2 million grant that we didn't get.
Yeah, I just was going to basically mention that we
I
didn't,
heard about that.
that Culver wasn't chosen.
What happened?
The Preserving Main Street one, is that what
Yeah,
you're referring
yeah.
to? They chose three finalists for that, and one of them was one I predicted they would choose, was Attica. But that's a pilot program, so it's not one of those grants where like they're gonna choose 20 communities across the state. So those 3 communities now will compete for that grant.
Do we
And
know,
were one of the 3.
do we know where we missed it or what happened?
No, Okra's not real, unless they schedule a feedback session with you, they will not tell you that. It's sort of similar with Stuller. They give you a feedback session, but they never really get too specific, because if you start offending elected officials over those things, it can get kind of ugly for Okra. But no, they aren't going to give you feedback on why you didn't get it.
I just
I
wanted,
just
well,
wanted to say that, they had applied for it, they did good work. And that, unfortunately, they weren't chosen.
Hmm.
And if they can, this is a pilot program, and so if next year they have the program again, they may be selected.
If you look at, Attica was one of the 3, and I thought they would be, because Attica's been talking to Okra about their downtown. Their downtown has no businesses. It's empty, it's abandoned, it made the top 25 worst downtowns in the US. I think Okra's looking to do a major transformation with something that dire. For them to pick that particular downtown is kind of interesting, because I've worked with Attica when I was at Troyer Group, and it is a really dire situation that they're in.
It's a very historical location.
Yes, I mean, they still have 50s looking vintage signs hanging, and it looks like it was abandoned after the 50s. There is no business on that main street. And they do have a Main Street organization that's done some stuff there, but they've actually even talked about moving their Main Street to another area. So it's kind of telling that they picked that. There's another one on the list that's pretty much in that same situation.
so you're telling me we weren't bad enough off for them to
Could
consider
be,
it?
yeah, could be that.
Hmm.
That with a pilot program too, you want to be able to say, hey, look what we took and look what we did with it. That was, one of my concerns with it. What'll happen though, as a result of that pilot program, they will start rolling out historic preservation grants and doing some bigger stuff with that if that pilot program goes well. So. There was a great turnout in terms of support letters for it. That group moved really quickly to get it done. It took quite an undertaking, which is the downside of not winning a grant. You put in a lot of work and then you kind of go, like we did in Stuller year 1.
Those midnight hours.
I wanted to at least acknowledge all of the work that they did put into it,
Yeah,
because, it's not like you just say, you put your name and address on the form and send it in, and they pick it. They pick you. It's a
yeah.
It's
And
a lot
doesn't
of
hurt
work.
to keep our name in front of them to say, hey, we're still plugging along. Because
Right.
they know Culver that hasn't.
Because there's always the potential no one else applies. Because some people don't like to do all that paperwork.
So,
Any other questions before I line up my next meeting?
Thank you.
Get that other group to change their meeting.
well, 90% of our agenda has already been covered, so
Yeah.
you can go.
Thanks for your support for our project.
Thank you for coming in.
Might even make you cookies at the next meeting.
Okay, we need to look at the next item basically is the financial report. I guess the financial report is all wrapped into
Dashboard.
the dashboard.
I did send that. Report. Sorry, I'll bring it back. I did send out the normal one that you're used to seeing, that also updated the financial, the dashboard.
I must have missed that one.
The dashboard on the, it's on the cloud, right?
Yeah.
It's in,
Yeah.
it was sometime Friday night, so. I'm not sure though that I moved the 100,000 that you all committed for the max 2 into one of those commitments.
Mhm.
And, the 30,000 for the max 2, so I'm gonna go back and revisit it, but I also clarified that I reserve the right to
Right, you did, yeah.
pull back on that report because I'm still working on reconciling for July, so.
Well, I guess at this point, we can just ask if anyone wants to, has any questions about it.
And you'll put the
approve
100,000,
it.
the 100,000 on the ambulance. That's a this year thing, right?
Yeah, I'm taking, it's next year.
Oh, so it'll
It'll
hit,
hit in 2020.
the ambulance will hit in 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm taking notes and.
Oh, okay.
Updates.
So we can just take a look at the financial report when it's updated
And
at the next meeting. Yeah. Going on to old business, Karen sent out all of the claims.
Mhm.
Do I have approval to pay the claims for Troyer and Linda?
I move that we approve the claims as submitted.
Do I have a second? To approve the,
I'll second the claims as submitted.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Gary and Paul, the update on Untitled Broadband meeting.
Seemed like a lifetime ago, didn't it, Gary?
It is. I think it was in July.
Yeah. Yeah, we were all young.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was just really an initial session that, you know, Gary, myself, Ginny, Karen, and David Hartling, who was former CEO of American over in Argus, were at the meeting. It was and I'll just throw out what I remember. Gary would add whatever you'd like as well. It was a baseline meeting on kind of where we were. And I tried this before, and it just wound up doing something with MediaCom, which doesn't work for us. And then became a conversation around what we could potentially do. We picked David Harling's brain because they had successfully brought one organization, Rochester Telephone, brought fiber all the way into their industrial park. And then they were also able to use fiber and get it all through the town of Argus. And we're able to connect on that. And he was sharing that. And then it became a conversation around what do we want to do? What's the best structure to do that as a town and explore it? And how do we not, in my words, how do we not repeat the 5 years that we did, that we stumbled through last time and did nothing? Didn't solve the problem. Didn't solve the problem. So Ginny took it on to go to council to talk about not necessarily a charter, but an approval and reinforcement that's as important to do. And then she was going to pull together a group of people to go forward and work on it. She was going to be involved. David's going to be involved. I was involved. I was just taking notes in this one. I just have too much going on. I cannot be involved. And I talked to her about that. And Gary, did I miss anything or?
No, I think when you talk about Culver, we had thoughts that this would, this solution could potentially envelop the entire shoreline.
Right.
And go beyond our borders. Just because that way we would have, more consumers that could potentially utilize it and make it more of an attractive target to any potential providers that, bid on whatever it's going to be. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to your point.
Right. So they talked about making this staying within the Culver zoning region, which would take you 2 miles around the town, which takes you all the way around the lake, which allows you to incorporate other groups and people. It gives the academy a bigger opportunity if they choose to break from their T1 line or have their tie in and do more, they could do that as well. And the second thing was conversation around, while people bring talent to this team, they are not telecom experts. And then the idea would be to hire, initially was discussed to find funds and hire a telecom expert to go out and say, these are who do it in the area. These are your best choices. You build a request for proposal around that, depending what you're planning to do, what's your end game, and then use that expert or that consultant to actually do a lot of the work, which kind of makes it palatable and easier to understand, and you get to the result that you want.
Yeah, and I think with having the consultant or the professional put together options for CRC to, conclude on, makes it more credible. You can't just have people coming in off the street and saying, "Oh, we should do microwave," and
Yeah.
I don't need internet. I send emails and look at cats.
Yeah, cat videos.
Cats, but cat videos on
Yeah.
TV. So I just think to avoid what happened in the past.
Yeah.
I know there's some cost involved, but we definitely need to be as confident in our decisions as possible.
So just to add one anecdotal piece of information, and it's not a big data, just one person, an individual who went to the Culver High School, went off and she got her PhD. She had a great career. She does things internationally as a psychologist, and her whole business is based on webinars and doing webinar work. Back here, because she has family back here and has a house back here visiting. And she goes, I'd love to live in this town, but I will never live in this town because I can't work because I don't have consistent internet. She goes, I make my living on this. And I mentioned in passing what we were talking about, I said, you tell me the day you guys do that, then my world changes. Office, and there's demand that's outside of our experience set. And just to add to what Gary's saying, I think we need to make this for people that really do use this as a lifeline, because many do, and they need to understand that. But I think the next step from this is Jenny's actually taking this and running it with it, and she'll pull together who's going to participate on the team and working on that.
Yeah, and Jenny's the council members or David, whoever's put on this task force, are going to provide strategic vision, make decisions versus the day-to-day, what kind of consultant should we hire and so forth.
Go ahead.
No.
I was just curious the timeline on when you imagine this will happen and sort of when we'll be getting the next update.
Jenny hadn't run out the door, I would have asked her.
Yeah,
I'll see her Wednesday. I'll ask her, we'll see her Wednesday, and I'll ask her about that. The idea is not this to become a lifelong project. The reality is, once you're selected, whoever you select, and I'll just, as an example, Rochester Telephone, they're doing work Southwest, whoever you select, it will take them a year to put in everything they need to. But that's because we're living with something that just doesn't seem to work for us.
And the infrastructure that gets laid, in place, I mean, it's gotta be good for 20 years. In 5 years, how many devices are our houses gonna have? And are we gonna have the bandwidth to, under current circumstances? Probably not. So it's gotta be pretty forward thinking.
I'm excited. Thank you for doing all this, research and outreach, getting us going. I'm excited. It seems to be something that the town needs desperately. So.
Need something that's reliable 24/7. Next item on the agenda, if there's no more questions on that, so related housing options.
So I put a note out in our SharePoint, and you all have this. I'll just kind of run quickly through it. This was a result of our working session. And I said I'd look, find out what what options do we have in as it relates to housing in TIFs, because we talked about, do we have the ability to do a residential TIF? Is that the only tool that we have to use out there in helping the town? Jenny, we have a follow-on question with Jenny because of looking at our ratio to qualify for residential TIF. If planned use developments or PUDs do not count because they're condos and they're condo associated related things, and they're not counted as individual housing, that may help us because Maple Ridge, even though they look like individual houses, they are a PUD. And we'll take a look at that because that may give us some flexibility as a town. But we have more things than just pursuing a residential TIF. Condos and apartment buildings, apartments and the condos that have been built are areas that qualify under a PUD. I'll just say as a side note, one of the things we've learned as we are going through line by line in the TIFs, TIF 1, the vast majority of the incremental assessed value in TIF 1 are a result of PUDs. The Cove and 2 of the projects that Collins has, and this is just TIF 1. We haven't even gotten to what's going on in Sand Hill, but that drove over $20 million in incremental assessed value of the 30 million that we have. Significant. And we'll have more data and information for you as we finish the TIF review. But, as a town, you think of things and you go, wow, I always think that TIFs are supported by the businesses and that maybe ACPI carries a lot of it and some of the other businesses. But actually, because real estate does really well in our town, this is a big driver. It's a big, big driver. There is, so that's a review to look back, if say the Van Hawk property, they do a PUD there, that will be another significant improvement to the town and to the TIF. I mentioned and talked about residential TIFs, and I'm not going to read all through this. I put the background information in here for yourselves as we're going forward. If we decide as a CRC to go forward, everyone has the base information to start with, and people can sit down and say, I want to lead this. I want to do this on the housing thing. There are 2 other aspects. There's housing TIF allocated areas where you go into. We have low and no occupancy housing. We probably don't have that in Culver. Even the stuff that is really dangerous to live in gets torn down and somebody else lives there. So we really don't have blighted areas that.
I debate the efficiency of things getting down that are abandoned, especially in my neighborhood. Yeah. It's amazing how many things we've reported as having mold or unsound foundations as the sound of a tractor tears them down. And then the last is age-restricted housing. That is more for those that are in retirement ages and higher. It purposely excludes targeting areas like what we've just done with Sand Hill, where you have families and children coming in. So, and we may have a pretty decent stock of that, but those are these are the 4 areas when you start thinking about if we're doing something related to housing, doing something related to non-industrial, non-commercial, we have some tools, and they actually have served us well, better than I think we'll find out. They've served us very well as a town. That's it.
We already discussed the TIF review. So
I know you won't like this, but I want to add one more thing to it. we were looking at three things. One is review 100% of every TIF line item in the documents, and there are quite a few. And we're learning a lot about the town and just learning some things that need to be scrubbed out. We're doing that, but there are two other areas that we were going to look at. And if you think it's beyond your scope, say so. The second is there's an ability to combine your TIFs. You can take TIF 1 and TIF 2 and bring them together. It doesn't change their termination date. Each property terminates at the same time. There's like a little bit of a cost to it, but we're going to find out if the cost and the benefits make sense and make a recommendation back. Find them. You don't have to split projects anymore. So if you're doing something in the town that's significant, your entire TIF counts, so that all the funds come out of the one area.
You don't have to pick which TIF.
You don't have to say TIF 2 supports this because this is on this part for stormwater drain. TIF 1 can only pay for this. And if we're looking at bigger things to change, like if we were pursuing fiber, or to door to trunk fiber, and then having it all in one TIF makes it interesting. The second thing is we're looking at what should we add? Should we be adding to the TIFs? What should we look at saying we recommend that there should be a new TIF? And these are the areas that need to be added into that. And that'll be an initial conversation we'll come back to you on. And again, the goal is to have this by September. Sometime in September, we're doing 2 meetings a week right now and getting through it. But hopefully by our September meeting, we'll have at least some preliminary information back to you. I've been bothering Karen with all these questions and notes. And I think she purposely cuts my internet just to pay me back. But she's done a great job. She gave us the tools that we can use. She gave us all the last 5 years of assessed value and incremental value and base values. And we've been able to figure out where the outliers are. It's really helped us. That's it.
Thank you, Paul.
Mhm.
Is there any public input? Nope. All right, member input. Karen, do you have any?
Good, thank you.
John? Gary?
Yes. On Main Street, there are some storm sewer grates that have been loose since the project has been finished. I rode over them on the way here. And tomorrow, when I go through on Main Street again, I'll ride over them again, and it makes this god awful noise. And have we paid that contractor everything, or?
I believe there was an instruction to go ahead and release that bond, and I can tell you that Bob jumps up and down every time he talks about contractor to get him back in town. So I will text Bob again, and
Yeah, I had talked to Bob
it is not off his radar, I can guarantee you.
a couple of months back, and he said he hoped to have that resolved this summer.
Oh, we've got another.
Yeah.
5 weeks.
It is not for lack of trying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is just trying to get them to,
Probably trying to draft a letter.
Yeah, Mr. Clevenger's services may be needed.
that is a possibility. Bill, do you have anything?
I have nothing, thank you.
Just one question. I wasn't able to make it to the opening. We got back a little too late for downtown when you had the event, the ribbon cutting. Did MCEDC do they talked about doing a big press release and supporting you on that because the lieutenant governor was there? Did that happen?
To the best of my knowledge, they didn't do a press release, but they were able to get both Channel 22 and Channel 16 there, and those things went on the news after. So there were multiple occurrences on local media for that. I don't know if they contacted them. I did, and the local radio station was there. One of the pilot was there.
I went to their site. I went to the MCEDC site. I didn't see it on there. That's why I was asking.
Greg talked to me a couple times about the other stuff, but he didn't.
Okay.
I don't think there was a press release.
Thanks.
And Greg was there, Laura was not.
And I have Nothing to add. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make- Second.
Okay. Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Did you want that?